Well, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Gridiron and Growth Podcast. I am your co-host, Bennie Fowler, along with my co-host, Ryan Harris. And today we have the Sandman in the building, Cory Sandhagen. Welcome to the show. Man, really appreciate you taking the time. Ryan, for background, Cory and I were training at the same gym, Resilience Code. It's good to see you, man. How's everything been?
Yeah, it's been really good. I had an injury in my last fight, so that one's kind of clearing up now. So I'm kind of feeling a lot better jumping into a camp. So hopefully that'll be what I'm doing soon. And other than that, kind of really like narrowing into how I want the second half of my career to go and just like settling into the way that I want that to go. And yeah, it's been all good.
Before we dive into your career currently, what does the second half look like? Because I'm seeing you starting to teach on Instagram now in terms of what you're doing with everything you're fighting.
Yeah, I'm just trying to juice this thing as much as I can, man. You know, like I'm trying to make as much money as I can out of this thing, you know, and there's like a lot of avenues that I really wasn't even exploring, like YouTube and Instagram and just all of that stuff that I really wasn't exploring at all. And then I really want to get myself out there so that fans can see a little bit more of my personality, because that's really important, because we're in a sport where sport and entertainment are mixed, and the more popular you are, kind of the first picks you get in opponents and all that. So yeah, I'm just trying to do that. I'm trying to like really gear up for like getting used to what it would mean to be a champion and what my life would look like as far as how that would go. I feel like people sometimes they'll win and win and win and then oops their way into a lifestyle that they really didn't ask for as champion. And I'm just trying to like get familiar with what that would look like and, you know, just hitting all the steps in my head so I could be prepared for all of it.
Now that you're looking at that second half, I'm sure different things don't bring as much anxiety as it used to, or you know how to keep people away. What's different about fighting now at this stage of your career?
Well, they feel a lot bigger. They're like definitely a lot bigger. There's, you know, for a long time there, I was just fighting and being like, cool, like I'm fighting, and then not really realizing the whole entertainment piece, the whole publicity piece, the whole other piece that, like I said, comes with being a world champ in our sport, which is just different, you know. It's like very centered around me. It would be like if the, you know, Cowboys won the Super Bowl and then like you're the only Cowboy, you know. It's like a really big deal, you know what I mean? So
100%.
Yeah, so just kind of getting comfortable with that. I think that I'm in a really good place as far as how I go into fights, where I am just personally. I'm really good at handling a lot of fears now. I'm good at handling a lot of, you know, just like the silly tricks that your brain will try to play on you with all of this stuff. I'm really good at handling all that stuff. I feel like when I go into fights, I know where I'm supposed to be as far as, you know, like not getting too excited, not being too low, how I am with that. So I think I've really narrowed down and kind of like cracked the code for myself, at least as far as how to be a really good competitor.
What are the tactics or things that you do to set yourself up for a win? What does it look like to control your mind and your thought?
Yeah, I think that there's like two parts of that question. I think that there's the logistical, like how to actually be a better competitor, like the visualization, the meditations, you know, practicing the extra hours. And then I think that there's a big piece of working on yourself that matters a lot. I'm striving to be a guy that can't be hurt by anything. You know, like your words can't hurt me. Me losing can't hurt me. Me getting knocked out and getting cut, a worst case scenario, that can't shake the human being of Cory. And that's what I'm striving for. I'm not 100% that, but I think that goes a really long way, you know, letting go of what it is that you think you want in order for, you know, the universe to play out for what it is that you should get. I think that that's a really big piece, and, you know, like being able to be free enough to perform in a really high stakes scenario.
What were the things that you did to address and recognize the fear? And I want to first congratulate you on even doing that, because we know a lot of athletes will never admit that they have fear. What did you do that made you successful at handling it?
I like to follow my fear all the way down the rabbit hole. Like I'll like, hey, you're scared to get knocked out. Okay, why are you scared to get knocked out? Well, it's like, because I'll lose. It's like, okay, well, why am I afraid of losing? And it's like, well, because everyone's going to think you're a loser, and then you don't make as much money, and then maybe you're fighting a fight in your next one that you don't really want to fight. And I just follow that down all the way to where I'm like, oh, this is all silly. You know, like I'm going to be fine. You know,
I'm not
like
going to
I'm
be living in a van down the river. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, like I'm going to be fine.
I just love your self-awareness. I think that's something that I'm always trying to constantly work on is how do you get better? How do you actually face those things? So definitely want to acknowledge that.
What work does it take to be great?
I remember when I signed up at the gym when I was 17 years old. I was still playing basketball in high school at the time. And I would go to school, I would go to basketball practice, and then I would go to MMA practice. And then that summer, I would go to the 10 o'clock practice, I would go eat a breakfast burrito, I would go to the noon practice, and then I would go home, and then I would come again at night. I kind of always had that a little bit just naturally, just being raised that way, which was, obviously paid off. But, you just got to work hard, I guess, But outside of working hard, I think that you really have to love what it is that you're doing. Mm-hmm. I know that I don't think that people get the same fulfillment out of getting better that I get. I don't go to the gym. I'm a not fun guy at the gym. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm not jokey. I'm not funny, I get a lot of enjoyment out of just being okay, cool, I did that better today. And I think that just comes from a love of the sport and want to make it look like what I want it to look like.
I want to talk about what's it like to cut weight for a fight. What's the process look like for training camp? Because I know training camp is one of the most miserable things that NFL players go through.
Mine's 12 weeks long, and then it's really hard. Yeah, it's like what you're describing. It's really hard. It's 2 to 3 practices a day. It's the hardest part, and I'm sure that you guys know too, the hardest part about it, or at least I don't know how your guys' practices are, but we spar twice a week, and in camp and out of camp sparring is much different. I'm going to go train after this, and I'm, not worried at all about getting dinged up or, hit real good or, later in the day being messed up. But in camp, that's always on my mind.
That's who you're bringing in. You want somebody to come at you
absolutely, absolutely. I always pick the best guys, and then I keep the fight wherever they're best. I just try to beat them where they are, because in striking, it's kind of tough to find people that I can compete really highly with. So I just make whatever situation I need to make happen for me to get better. But yeah, so sparring really sucks. It feels like you get hit by a car every Tuesday and Friday. The weight cut piece, I usually start about 8 or 9 weeks before. I'm about 160 now. I got to make it to 135. The last week you cut 15 pounds by draining yourself of water, obviously hitting the sauna. You can lose a ton of weight in the sauna pretty easy. But yeah, I mean, you got to think too, man, everyone in this sport is weird. You don't get, you don't get into MMA being normal and you go play normal sports if you want to do something like that.
Are you calling us normal?
Maybe not. Maybe not at your guys' level. You probably aren't.
One of the things that I love that I'm glad they don't do in the NFL, but when you do the weigh-ins and you stand nose to nose, who has had the worst breath when you were standing there and all of your pre-fight, who are you God, this dude ate an onion, bro?
Actually, I have not been able to smell out of my nose for about 10 years.
What?
Yeah, because I deviated the septum and I got 30% going on in my nose, so I'm mostly a mouth breather, so I don't smell anything ever. So I'm actually immune to whatever. I have had some stinky opponents though.
Yeah.
Where I'm just ugh, and then the smell of blood is kind of gross. I can smell those things for sure. But
do they tell you guys before those nose to nose matchups hey, he's gonna just make it showy, or what do they say to you guys that it always ends up you gotta get pulled apart?
Nah, the UFC lets you be pretty much who you want to be. I know though that there's some guys that might try to pull some. I just keep my distance from them because I think it's wrong that they let people shove each other. And I know that Dana doesn't like it. It's just not a good look, I don't think. That's just not a good look for the sport. I've seen people, this one guy, Drakkar Klose, who's a bud of mine, he got shoved and he was cutting weight, man. He's down probably that dude cut a lot of weight. He was probably 15 pounds lower in water weight, you know what I mean? Gets shoved, whiplashes his neck, and can't fight the next day. So I don't really play around with that stuff, And I also don't give off the energy where someone would do that to me either. Those are kind of the feisty guy meets feisty guy, and they're cool, I can be feisty with this guy, you know what I mean? I don't give off that energy.
Talk about this, though. This is common. The baddest who can fight, who have won fights, they're the last person to fight. And they're the last person to tell you, oh, I'm a fighter. Like, where do you get that humility in fighting that the most of us who don't fight don't have?
Fighting's dangerous. You know, like, people don't realize how dangerous fighting is. Like, if I go out and get in a street fight and I break my hand and I'm out for 6 months, 8 months for my career, that's like a big deal. Like, even when you win, you lose most of the time. Like, I've had a ton of fights where I've won decisively and still gone home and been like, man, I can't train for like 2 months now because I got to let this recover. Fighting is dangerous. That's why don't do it. You know what I mean? Like, don't do it. I've seen way too many of my buds get really, really hurt. Like, horrific things happen by getting knocked out or like popped or dislocated. And when you see enough of that, you're like, oh no, like that's not for me. Yeah.
I love that. Be curious to see just, throughout your UFC career, what's been top 2 books that you've read that have just brought a lot of perspective.
Yeah, the 33 Strategies of War is a really good one. Another one that helped with fighting, I'll go over the one that I'm reading right now, which is a book called Oneness. It's a little bit out there, as far as spirituality goes, but I love it. I read it every morning and every night.
What can you tell our audience that can encourage them in failure to keep going?
Well, first, I'll say that I think it's normal because our society doesn't let people off the hook when they make mistakes.
100%.
They just don't, and that's messed up. One thing that I tried to do is cultivate a really good relationship with making mistakes. Like, I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, I care as far as like, okay, I got to do this better. But as far as other things, I'm like, I don't care. Like, I started a YouTube channel a couple months ago. Like, I'm going to suck at this for a while, and people are probably going to make fun of me, and I'm not going to do that great of a job, but I don't care. Because how else am I going to get better at something if I don't screw up a bunch of times? So I think one would be just cultivating a good relationship with making mistakes and just understanding that society is going to, like, people are going to shit on you for not, but who cares? Like, that's just society being weird society.
Cory, man, really appreciate you coming on the pod.
Honor.
This was great, man, and would love to have you back on after you win your next fight and just talk through that. But, man, really appreciate you taking the time today.
Yep, of course. Yep, I'll be here after the next one.
Yeah.